Hello, I'm Agent Random, yada yada. Alright, you know why you're here. It's Neo Secret Report time! If you haven't done so already, I do highly recommend watching the video that went up yesterday where I broke down the originals reports. These reports don't really recap much information from them, and as such, I'll be assuming that you already know everything covered in that video. Two things that I want to get out of the way before we start. 1. Obviously, I'll be spoiling the whole game and assuming that you know the full main story. 2. These reports are much less informative than the original games. Not like A New Day levels of vague, where they spend most of their time just raising questions, but there still are a lot of loose threads that go totally unexplained. I have my own personal answers to these questions, but I want this video to serve as a replacement for reading the reports yourself, so I don't want to put in any of my own personal theories. I'll be giving you the tools and information that the game gives you, and you can draw your own conclusions from there. So basically, if it wasn't outright confirmed in the game, I'm probably not going to say it. But of course, you are free to speculate in the comments. Now, let's begin! The reports in Neo are once again written by Sane Hanekoma, who otherwise makes no appearance in the game. Neo takes place 3 years after both the events of the original story and A New Day. Both of these events are given fancy titles. The events of the main story are referred to as Shibuya's Impurification, and A New Day is referred to as Shinjuku's Inversion. An inversion is when the underground and real ground collide, creating what angels call a purification. Essentially, it's when an angel steps in and hits Ctrl-Alt-Delete on a district. 3 years ago was when Shinjuku got inverted. To fully understand what happened there, it's important to identify both Shinjuku's composer and its conductor. The composer is Haz, and the conductor goes unnamed. However, he is stated to be the older brother of Tsugumi Matsune. My favorite fan name for this guy is Matt, so that's what I'm going to be using for the rest of the video because you can't stop me. So that Hanekoma could know what went down in Shinjuku, he spent like all 3 weeks of Neo harassing Haz to write a report on Shinjuku's inversion, and then commented that it probably wouldn't even be that detailed. Not super important, but I just want to note how there is definitely some salt from Hanekoma towards Haz. Anyway, it is learned that Haz is the one that pushed for Shinjuku's inversion because it was just a thing that Haz really wanted to do. But the conductor, Matt, disagreed with the idea of destroying Shinjuku. So to oppose Matt, Haz placed Kubo, the angel executor, within the Reapers in Shinjuku. How did that happen? Well, the reports never outright say this, but composers were silently retconned to be angels now. But wait, in the original game, weren't composers a tier beneath angels? Well, the thing with that is... Kubo went on to place some sort of influence on the Reaper Shiba. It's unclear if this influence was imprinting or some other method, but what's important is that this did change the way that Shiba acted. Prior to Kubo, he was likely super charismatic and able to gain the trust of his fellow Reapers. Multiple characters in Neo note just how much different of a person Shiba has become by the point in the game that we see. Hanekoma wonders what will happen when Kubo allows Shiba to return to his true self and how Shiba will react to all that he's done. This is something that we actually see on the final day, and it results in him choosing to rebuild Shinjuku. Tsugumi and Matt were skeptical about Kubo, so to protect Tsugumi, Matt sealed her soul away. Since the inversion was fast approaching, she used her latent ability, Trailer, to receive transmissions from the future versions of Neku, Shiba, and later Rindo to send visions to them in the present. Trailer is one of 6 latent abilities that we see in this game. 4 of the others are Rindo's Replay, Fret's Remind, Nagi's Dive, and Beat's Sound Surf. Latent abilities are naturally occurring special powers that some people with extremely high imaginations possess. They can be awakened when that person's vibes are tuned. The vibes necessary to make this happen specifically come from the higher plane, and when Kubo's Reaper Pin yoinks people to the underground, it uses those same vibes. This gives Rindo, Fret, Nagi, and Beat their latent abilities as soon as they enter the Reaper's game. Of course, that brings up the question on how Tsugumi got her latent ability awakened. Then, sometime after Neku was shot in A New Day, Kubo removes Tsugumi's Reaper status. As we almost see with Shoka, if you lose your Reaper status, you are erased. So Matt used all of his strength to place Tsugumi's sealed soul within Mr. Mew, which took so much energy that it erased Matt. This is the Mr. Mew that Shiki owned. which she had just before Neku was shot in A New Day and accidentally ripped some of his seams. So if you're keeping track of where everyone was at the end of A New Day, this means that Coco had to have hunted down Shiki immediately after she shot Neku, grab Mr. Mew from her, run to Shinjuku, and hand it to Tsugumi so Matt could put his sister's soul inside the doll. There are also noise in place that bind Tsugumi to the doll and force her body to act without will. Then because I don't know, Kubo immediately made Tsugumi a Reaper again. She is labeled as the sole survivor of Shinjuku's inversion. I guess by this point the other Reapers had been transferred to Shibuya. For Reapers to be transferred, they don't need the permission of a composer, just the conductor. The acting conductor for Shibuya at the time, who is generally agreed upon to have been Uzuki, is the one that authorized for Shinjuku Reapers to come to Shibuya. The Reapers brought in from Shinjuku should now be considered Shibuya Reapers, but the two groups didn't get along the best, so the ones from Shinjuku still carried the name of Shinjuku Reapers. Kubo then made his way to Shibuya. As Haz explains, Kubo was only ever ordered to invert Shinjuku, so the second that he entered Shibuya, he should have gotten sent to the timeout corner. But this group called the Elites just kinda decided to let Kubo do whatever. This is because not all angels agree with Shibuya's impurification and think that maybe an inversion would be for the best. Has this mindset as well. What happened to all the angels thinking that this was the optimal parallel world? But not all angels are going to let the city fall so easily. Specifically Joshua, who I'd like to remind you is also an angel now, went and started a secret large-scale game with Kubo, not unlike what he played with Kitaniji in the last game. I am legally required to mention that the secret reports do say that the secret game between Joshua and Kubo resulted in Shinjuku's destruction. This doesn't really make any sense and would be a huge game changer if it actually happened. But according to most sources, it's probably a mistranslation, so we're just gonna kind of pretend that the line doesn't exist. Especially since Joshua being involved in Shinjuku's destruction is actually never brought up ever again. Here are this game's rules. 1. Both Joshua and Hanekoma are banned from taking any actions within the game and are not allowed to communicate with one another. 2. Kubo is allowed to interfere to an extent. However, there does still appear to be some sort of limit on what he can do. And that's why there's 3. This game is played by 2 proxies. One playing for Joshua and one playing for Kubo. Joshua's proxy is Rindo and Kubo's proxy is Shiba. This makes Rindo the substitute for the composer and Shiba the substitute for the executor. This is why Shiba believes himself to be the executor. Rindo does not have composer level powers, nor does he know that he's a proxy, so he really can't do anything with that. But this means that when Shiba rose to conductor about a year after joining Shibuya, he was free to alter the rules of Shibuya however he felt like, since there was no composer to prevent him from doing so. First order of business was to make Shibuya's Reapers game adopt the rule set from Shinjuku's Reapers game. This meant doing away with the partner system and integrating the team system. However, just like in the first game, Joshua's proxy is not capable of reviving people and Joshua himself isn't there to do it either. This means that Shiba cannot allow a team to win and ask to be revived. It's in his best interest if the winning team always asks to continue playing. So to make that happen, he grabbed 2 of his Reapers and formed the Ruin Bringers. Hanekoma expresses a dislike towards the Shinjuku rules for the Reapers game, since in Shibuya, the whole point of the game is to find the most qualified players and try and get them to ascend to Reaper and then Angel. It's a game where things like entry fees are implemented so that each player is given a chance to re-examine their lives and potentially grow from that. Shinjuku, however, prefers to get as many players erased as possible. There are no entry fees as there is no longer a focus on self-growth. And now players are expected to fight each other, which also definitely helps with Shiba's objective of making sure that no players ever win the game. Shiba also totally wrecks the Reaper hierarchy. Reapers are supposed to be fighting for their lives just like players, but they're told to just chill out and let Shiba organize everything. As such, he also appointed himself as Game Master. The Ruin Bringers became the only ones to do any sort sort of field work because they're also a playing team. Also, this isn't said in the reports, but I wanted to mention it anyway. By Shinjuku rules, Reapers are seemingly no longer allowed to leave the underground just like a player. That said, they are allowed online access through the RNS as long as they don't reveal their identities. An example is Shoka's Swallow account. The RNS, or Reaper Networking Service, measures the imagination and vibes of each player and Reaper, making it super useful for managing the Reapers game. But because of how the internet works, that means that someone could theoretically access it from the RG. To do so, the person needs to be a super good hacker and already know that the underground exists. This is what Rhyme is shown to do over the course of the story. While this doesn't require any changes in a person's soul code like what would happen if a person is killed and sent to the underground, it is noted that this could possibly inhibit imagination, as imagination doesn't totally properly transfer digitally. This is why the full meaning of a piece of art cannot be captured on a screen. Hanekoma says that he does plan to eventually resume his work as the artist cat and will need to adjust for how his art will look when shared digitally. He plans to ask Kaye, the developer of the RNS, for advice on this. Prior to the first week, Kubo had sent the Reaper pins out into the real ground. These would draw in people with super high imaginations. Typically, people's souls undergo a process called demodulation when they die, which sets their soul code to naturally be in tune with the underground. The Reaper pin skips modulation, leading to some janky side effects. The players brought in with the Reaper pin are basically still alive, so anyone who had previously tuned to the underground can still see them. As an example, Rhyme is still able to see Beat even when he's in the underground. Kubo had got everyone from the real ground to wear Reaper pins in hopes of pulling a 5-star legendary Neku, but on the first day he was only able to draw a common Rindo and Fret. Sensing the power of Joshua's proxy, Sho got himself involved with the two and began studying them. At the same time, Hanekoma began to sense Neku's vibes coming from Shinjuku. On the third day, Rindo activates his latent replay ability for the second time. Remember, it was awakened because of the angel vibes in the Reaper pin. Replay is an especially powerful latent ability, because, you know, it's flipping time travel. Interestingly, Rindo is the perfect person to wield replay. Rindo is a very passive character. He's afraid of the responsibility from making decisions. He adopts others' beliefs and pretends that they're his own, allowing people like Matoi as another to totally define his life. This creates stagnation in his soul. This stagnation begins to fade when he's forced to take charge, but always comes back in full force whenever a new powerful ally joins the Wicked Twisters. Hanekoma notes that this stagnation spikes when Sho, Beat, and Neku join, since he takes comfort in someone else being able to lead. These traits are what allow him to maintain the high imagination necessary to pull off replay. Note that it does take Hanekoma a decent while to figure this out. He says that it was much harder for him to determine what Rindo's issues were compared to Neku's. Unlike the original game, Hanekoma can't have any involvement. He can't even talk to people. He says that figuring out Rindo's problem would be way easier if they could just talk. Hanekoma is able to determine though that replay is way too powerful of an ability, and he brings into question if it is even naturally occurring within Rindo. He speculates that it was likely gifted to him by someone from the higher plane. Who is this person? Well, actually it's... Hanekoma does note that all of these souls from the timelines that Rindo just sorta deletes are all stored in his Reaper pin. These planar distortions are dissonance energy. You may recognize that as the energy that Coco used to create the pseudo-parallel world in A New Day. Why does she have this insane ability? Well, the distortions cause the Reaper pin to change appearance with each use and will eventually result in a burst before long. At the end of the 4th day, Beat's Reaper pin tuned him into the underground. On the 6th day, we see our first Scramble Slam. There's no secret motive to a Scramble Slam. It's just something that Shiba finds entertaining. The Ruin Bringers never participate in these because they would likely win, making the other teams feel like victory was hopeless. Which, I mean, they kinda already are. The Deep River Society, Varia Beauties, and Pure Hearts had all been forced to replay the game at least 30 times by this point, and were starting to feel like winning was impossible. because it pretty much was. Also on this day, Sho figured out that Rindo could time travel. Sho has undergone some changes since we saw him in week 3 of the original story. Most of these changes come from the noise refinery sigil that Coco used to revive him. 1. This removed his taboo abilities. 2. This heightened his imagination to an extreme degree. This is what allowed him to sense vibes almost like an angel does. Replay is an ability that only affects the lower planes, those being the underground and real ground, and any angel in those planes are able to tell when a replay is done. This is how Kubo knows on final day the 2nd that this was Rindo's second try, and how Sho knows immediately on day 5 that Rindo had activated replay. The final change of Minamoto's fundamental vibes is the addition of a slight willingness to cooperate with others. On day 7, the Deep River Society are dried up. Because they came in last place, all of its members are erased along with the team leader. The next week, there are still only 4 teams. No new players joined. This is because of another one of Shinjuku's rules. Only players who have a higher imagination than the average imagination of the current players may join the game. Now that the Deep River Society is out, the bar has been raised a ton. This is why no new players enter the game beyond this point. Hanekoma also notes that Shiba may or may not be getting screwed over. You see, when a district is inverted, it's traditional for the conductor to contact the composer and be invited to the higher plane to become an angel. Hanekoma speculates that Shiba may just not know about this protocol since he hasn't hit up Joshua about it yet. Oh yeah, that also means Matt could have totally become an angel, but he just wanted to defend Shinjuku and his sister so much that he chose Erasure instead. What a legend. Beats joins the party on the 2nd day of the 2nd week. Now that there is someone else to carry the party, Rindo's soul stagnates even more. The Wicked Twister's bass groove is said to be exceptionally low. On the 5th day, Shoka begins to interfere with the game, trying to make things easier for the Wicked Twisters. This goes against Shiba's just chill out rule and is what inevitably results in her losing her Reaper status when Motoi snitches. Shoka then loses her Reaper status and is locked out of her RNS Swallow account, replacing it with a player account. The week ends and Coco tries her best to keep Tsugumi alive after her vessel Mr. Mew sustained some terminal boo-boos. She would also like to free Tsugumi, but there are 2 issues there. 1, there are plague noise binding her to the doll. Secondly, the doll is damaged, which somehow prevents her from leaving. An angel's power would be required to safely remove Tsugumi. But Hanekoma and Joshua are unable to take any actions. There's no way that Kubo's willing, and Has probably just doesn't care. So the only other option is to get the original creator of the doll, Shiki, to repair it, and that will somehow free Tsugumi's soul. Issue is that Shiki spends most of the final week out of town, so this takes a while. The 3rd week sees Shiba initiate sudden death. This allows players and Reapers to erase one another. Then Shiba kicks off the inversion. He releases plague noise, which destabilizes the code of Shibuya. This leaves the underground and real ground particularly fragile. Hanekoma describes the effect as if some of Shibuya's screws were loose and some are missing altogether. The whole thing is about to collapse. The underground and real ground now get super close to colliding, and if that boundary is shattered, then the whole city will be erased and Shibuya will be purified. Hanekoma notes that angels are usually against jumping to purification so quickly, and finds it odd that Joshua continues to do nothing about his own city being purified. On the 3rd day, Kanon is erased, which causes character development for Fret. Hanekoma then goes on to talk about how he was totally Fret all along, and how you can tell because they have the same vest. Yup, that definitely happened. No need to fact check me on that, trust me, it's canon. As the end draws near, everyone scrambles to get in their places. Shibuya Reapers have to decide if they want to stand by and let Shibuya get inverted, or if they actually want to do something about it. Some of them try to contact Hanekoma, but by the rules of the game, he's forced to leave them on red. Meanwhile, Sho begins to pick up more and more of the vibes from Rindo's replay. It resonated with Sho in particular since the energy inside of Rindo's Reaper pin is dissonance, and Sho was revived using dissonance. Sho realized that these powers were way too high frequency to be in the underground, so he tried to erase Rindo. Beat felt the responsibility to carry the team all on his own and was ready to sacrifice himself for the rest when Sho attacked. Beat would have been erased had Neku not finally broken out of Shinjuku and come to the rescue. Neku was locked in Shinjuku by Joshua just after Coco shot him in order to keep Neku safe from the people that may try to use him. Soon after Neku joins, the team removes the noise binding Tsugumi's soul to Mr. Mr. Mew. On the 6th day, Suzukichi tries to trap all of the wicked twisters in the Shibuya River. This is because Suzukichi cares about his fellow Reapers and the Reapers game more than really anyone else, and he's not okay with the inversion. So he tries to take the fight to Shiba on day 6. But just in case he's not able to take down Shiba, he trapped the wicked twisters in the Shibuya River as a failsafe. The river exists on its own plane. The Shibuya River flows from Shinjuku to Shibuya, but since the river is on its own plane, that means that it is unaffected by the inversion and continues to flow to Shibuya even though there's no source in Shinjuku anymore. Suzukichi hides all of the wicked twisters there, expecting them to be kept safe should he fail to take out Shiba. Suzukichi fails to take out Shiba, and apparently he fails so hard that Shiba makes the inversion happen a whole day early. Rindo uses replay again in order to stop this, but Neku begins to speculate that replay may make some real bad stuff happen. Neku is correct. Kubo's backup plan in the case that Shiba failed to defeat Rindo and make the inversion happen was to use all the dissonance stored in Rindo's pin. Remember, the Reaper pin stores all of the wasted energy that Rindo retcons out of existence when he time travels. This dissonance then multiplies each time that Rindo uses replay again. Kubo is able to take full advantage of this using his own latent ability as the Noise Master. The Reaper pin generates bird noise in advance each time that Rindo uses replay. Then, when the time is right, all of the imagination of all the distortions will be placed inside of each of the bird noise, creating the Soul Pulvis. It should be noted that the form of the Soul Pulvis is not set and can totally change from being a bunch of birds, like into a firebird. From there, Kubo erases all of our favorite characters and finally decides to freaking do something about this guy killing all these people and exercises, that guy. Haz was totally on board with Shibuya going boom, but decided to intervene because he was just that interested in Rindo and his team. A month later, he gives Rindo the ability to replay once more, and Rindo makes a decision! Whoa! The wicked twisters managed to all come out unscathed for 2 reasons. 1, Rhyme's Operation Awakening. 2, Haz rebirthed the Soul Pulvis into Phoenix Cantus. This gave the wicked twisters just 1 target to worry about. Also, each feather on its tail represents 1 time that Rindo used replay. Haz supposedly did all of this interfering in order to get Joshua to also do something, but the most Joshua did was just stand there since his presence alone would stabilize Neku's soul. This is in contrast to the first game where his presence alone would strain Neku's soul. Hanekoma double-checked the logs on the RNS and confirmed that Joshua did not interfere at all in this battle. The victory was done solely by the people of Shibuya and the wicked twisters. And then the game was over. As always, Joshua had won. Joshua finally revived Neku by doing the same process he would do to revive anyone. He went to a parallel world where Neku was never shot by Coco 3 years prior and sampled that world to modify the space and memories around Neku so that he could live in the real ground without issue. Oh, also, you know that scene where Joshua goes to Rindo and Shoka and says,
"I put her back on the street with the other stray cats. Find her, and you win."
Yeah, because Joshua is Joshua, he was totally just trolling there. In actuality, that was the moment where Shoka was going to be erased. But Joshua saves her soul and got it reborn in the real ground. Because Joshua was grateful to Rindo for doing a bang-up job, Joshua decided to throw him a bone and save his Fango GF. Hanekoma then speculates that maybe the reason Joshua didn't interfere regardless of how dire things got was to teach Rindo, and by extension Shibuya, to accept the circumstances that they found themselves in and take action. Hanekoma expresses how proud of Rindo he is and hopes to meet Rindo in person someday. And that's a wrap! Thank you so much for watching! These 2 videos took a ton of work to create, so if you enjoyed them, I'd appreciate any support that you're able to give. I also want to give a special thanks to 2 people. Firstly, Fretpilled for being a huge help and proofreading the script to make sure that I didn't say anything too stupid. And secondly is Kame for making all these Neo cutscene effects that I was using throughout the video. And in fact, they're free for anyone to use. So if you want to use these for yourself, I'll leave a link in the description to his channel where you can grab the After Effects pack. And even if you aren't interested in using the pack, I'd just super recommend watching the video where he announces it. It's actually one of the funniest World Ends With You videos I've seen on the platform. Anyway, if I've gotten any facts wrong, please let me know in the comments and I'll be sure to mail you a handwritten apology begging for forgiveness. Alright, deuces dummies.
He's got opinion, a posted suggestion, but never reveals his name. Read by someone taken as a good one, but nobody knows who wrote it. Few lies of the sentence line, anonymity annoying me all the time. It's like a 2 channel where people just throw their anger, forget about those